Man, y'all, we need to talk about Dragon Ball Daima Episode 8, because, first of all, let me say, I am completely blown away by this episode. I've been kind of critical of the series up to this point. This episode, while I do reserve some criticisms, and we'll get to that here in a moment, overall, I am floored by how phenomenally well this episode was animated. So let me just get into my ratings right out of the gate, because animation-wise, I'm going to give it a solid 10. You might argue that it was not a perfectly animated episode, and I would agree with you. But hear me out. When the anime was on point, it was an exemplary, I guess, example, for lack of a better way to put it, of the modern level of animation that can be brought to an old style, or modern animation techniques that can be brought to an old style of drawing such as this. And let's face it, the Dragon Ball style is fairly aged. I mean, it's way more simplistic than a lot of shows that we've had in the past even decade or two. So it is an older style, but the animation was absolutely perfect. It reminded me a lot of the One Piece movies and things like that, where the animators really brought their absolute A game. Like, it was next level completely. So there were a couple spots that I could, super nitpick, but my honest answer here is the animation, especially with the fight scene, how fluidly everything moved, how the backgrounds and everything were not static. Everything was in absolute motion. The way that the animators and the Dragon Ball's always been really good about this, when the lines kind of start to squiggle and get blurred when in the tweens between keyframes and things like that. Just the animation was absolutely exactly what I want to see. I have been reviewing the Danmachi Season 5 series that's going on right now, which, funny enough, there's another parallel in this episode to that. We'll get to that here shortly. And I've been very critical of that studio, JC staff, on how they handle that series in as far as their animation goes. In fact, they took a week off this week, which might actually be to clean some of that up. So Toei is really bringing their A game here. This is like what I've wanted to see out of anime in 2024, especially when we're talking about such an old school style. When we go back to Dragon Ball Super and things like that, there is absolutely no argument in anyone's mind that Toei really phoned in the early part of that series. And even the later part of that series, I think, like the Tournament of Power and all that, for as good as that was, pales in comparison to the fight between Goku and Tamagama, the Tamagama 3. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Yeah. Tamagami 3. So I had to check my notes there on that one. So the honest answer here is, for me, I would give the animation an 11 if I could. So any fault that it could have, I'm just going to give it a 10. Like, this is what I want out of anime. This is what I expect out of anime. And I don't think you can honestly expect anything more out of anime in 2024. This is amazing. Mind-blowing. Sound design, I'm also going to give it a 10. Once again, this fight scene was exquisite. So well done. And normally I kind of cover the story. In this one, I'm actually going to cover the action. And I'm going to give the action also a 10 out of 10. Let's be honest here. This fight between Tamagami and Tamagami 3, technically, and Goku is what we have wanted to see since the series started. And I think this series spent a lot of time dragging its heels. But the fact that the beginning part of this fight very much felt like old school Dragon Ball. It was a lot of martial arts. There was a lot of weight and a lot of fluid motion, but to the point at which everything seemed to actually have weight. When Tamagami was swinging the hammer, you could see the amount of effort he was having to put in to swing that thing, the amount of pressure when Goku's being swung around on it that he's under, basically not to just get squished around in the air. Even the movement of his hair, the slow motion sequence when Goku's actually fighting Tamagami there at the beginning. Everything about this was absolutely on point. It's what I want to see out of the series. I don't just want to see, Ki Blast struggles and one-shots and, I don't want to see a rehash of the Cell games. What I really want is to get back to the core of this, to get back to the martial arts and the stuff that really made, in my opinion, Dragon Ball the best of the best of the best. Even if you go back to the original Saiyan saga, when it's the showdown between Nappa and the Z Fighters, or even to a certain extent Vegeta versus Goku, there was a lot of martial arts. Yes, there was a lot of posturing and a lot of screaming. And what I think what they've done with Daima, at least, the reason this fight was so short is because they kind of cut out the middleman. They cut out all of that, screaming and posturing and, just the stuff that Dragon Ball has been criticized for over the years. And what they do is they get down to the core of what we, as the viewer, as the fans, what we want to see. And I appreciate that. That's exactly what I have come to expect and what I want out of this series. Going back actually to a moment to the audio, I'm even going to give shouts out to the voice talent here. Miyaki Kenta, the voice of Tamagami 3, who's, funny enough, also the voice of All Might from My Hero Academia, and has done, you can look up the dude's credits. He's done so many things in so many series. Some of my favorites, Initial D. I think he even did some Gray Man back in the day. This guy goes way even back to, believe it or not, old series like I loved early on in anime, Steel Angel Kurumi and things like that. Like, this guy's got the chops. And he brought his A game, like chef's kiss on that performance. Fantastic. I cannot say enough good stuff about this episode. Now, as the episode kind of goes on, we get about the first half of the episode is that fight sequence. And as much as I really would love more, what I think is absolutely just perfect pacing for me is there's a point at which in the fight where it shifts from just them enjoying the battle and enjoying the martial arts and enjoying it to, okay, Goku's like, okay, I actually got to beat you. We got to get serious now. And Goku goes Super Saiyan, and there's that classic shift in Goku's personas from when he's just lighthearted and enjoying the battle and having a good time to, okay, we got to get down to business here. Goes Super Saiyan, and even Tamagami, who's just like, I agree, let's do this. And yes, it does devolve into key battles, but what I really do want to say is, number one, I love the fact that they really focus on the fact that Tamagami's his Ki Blasts are like almost inorganic, almost mechanical in a way, and the fact that he's basically kind of like shooting like almost like an energy blast that's not as organic, where Goku's is very organic. His is almost very inorganic in a way. He seems like, dare I call him an android, but somewhere like a biomechanical, it looks very metallic on the outside, but obviously has very fluid biological movements. It's just a great combination of those feels. But the fact that his Ki Blasts aren't naturally or occurring like life energy, they seem to be generated from somewhere. I did appreciate that. Yes, you could argue, okay, like the Gammas did that or whatever, but I appreciate it for what it is in the vacuum of this series. Now, I will say, as much as I did kind of criticize it a little bit for devolving into just Ki Blast and things like that, they did still throw in enough of classic action and classic martial arts. And what I appreciate is the throwback to classic Dragon Ball Z. The beginning of this was like Dragon Ball, and then we get into like the Dragon Ball Z portion at the end, which does kind of harken back to the big key battles that we saw there in the Saiyan saga, especially. Like, I don't think it's ever going to touch the beam struggle between Goku and Vegeta in that saga. But the fact that we had a pseudo beam struggle between Goku and Tamagami, and the fact that you saw Goku's literally just punch through his, just showing the raw power, and then he just kind of like hurls him all over the landscape, and when he finally focuses down and lobs the rest of like the energy of the Kamehameha into Kamigami, it just felt fantastic. And it felt so good to finally see like the culmination of what we've expected for the past 7 to 8 episodes, and now to get it felt like we achieved something. I did want more. I wanted the fight to be longer, but what we got was absolutely amazing. And I've gushed about it now for 10 minutes. I loved it that much. Going back to the sound design, the one thing, because as we get later on into the episode, we now get more into the kind of scheming and the plot of Dr. Arinisu, the sister of the Kaioshin, who's you start to get more of her whole story and what she's actually attempting to accomplish. And while at first it seemed like she was working for Goma, now it's become apparent that she's like very much a double agent. And even Goma and I forget what his lackey's name is, the brother of the Kaioshin, Shin, I guess, or whatever his other name was. Not super important that, but the fact that they kind of went back and they watched that episode, the original classic episode of Dragon Ball Z, and they kind of alluded to the fact that Dr. Arinisu is actually in the background collecting fragments of Buu when Buu was first blown apart by Goku. So, very neat. Call it a retcon. Yeah, it doesn't change a huge amount. It is a retcon, but it really doesn't change the outcome of the of that whole saga. It's just a nice little Easter egg, like, what if? Maybe she was in the background. She knew there was something going on. This scheme's been going on for a long time. You know? I appreciated that. Now, I'm going to go back on the sound design here. I'm going to kind of backtrack for a second. I love Dr. Arinisu in this episode. The scheming, the gall, pretty much. And just her whole presence on screen is fantastic. And I was trying to place the voice, and I had to actually look this up. But I thought, and I was like, there's no possible way. But yes, Dr. Arinisu is voiced by Hikasa Yokota. And if you don't know, and for those of you that watch my other channel, Raptors Delight, and we've been enjoying Season 5 of Danmachi, in fact, enjoying all 5 seasons of Danmachi, this is... Your ears do not deceive you. This is the same voice actor that does Freya in that series, which is almost it's like perfect casting because their personalities are extremely similar. And I love that. I thought it was a coincidence, but no, it's absolutely like just spot on casting on the part of Toei. So absolutely love it. And her whole scheme, that you do get a little bit more of a retcon. Initially, she goes to the witch, Marba, I think was her name. And Marba's like, you know, coming up with this new... It looks like she's brewing up a new Boo-ish creature. So it looks like some of the leaks we heard early on that there's going to be a new Boo... You can't really call him Majin. I guess you could call him Majin, but Majin is kind of like a generic word at this point. But a new Boo species character looks like they're coming. Looks like they're going to be blue, if that's the case. I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. But they mentioned that Dr. Arinisu is like, yeah, I know you made Boo. And she's like, no, Bibbidi did. I swear. And she's like, yeah, we both know you did. And I adored that. I thought it was a fun little, like, I mean, unnecessary retcon at the end of the day, but it's a neat way to kind of work this in. And can we be real? Bobbity always felt like a bit of a fraud, and to think that Bobbity comes from a long line of frauds kind of makes a bit of sense, if I'm totally honest here. So zero parts of me are shocked by that. Um, and that you have this like secret, you know, uh, I guess for lack of a better way to put it, just like this secret entity that's actually in the process of making Bobbity or making Boo and all that stuff. I really did enjoy that. So it looks like they're making another Boo-like creature. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And then you find out that Dr. Arnisu is actually the reason she's in touch with Glorio is because essentially she's going to be taking the Dragon Balls to use for her plot. Now, if there is one story-based element, so I'm going to get to my story review here, or story score here in a second. If there is one plot element that I wish we got more of, I loved the whole episode, but the one thing that I never really got out of this episode were the original stakes, and that's, Dende has been taken away. We never saw that here, and it was almost necessary that Goku or somebody mention that, and it never really gets mentioned. The stakes don't really feel like they're there, and because of that, I am going to take a point off. And for the retconning that I think was slightly unnecessary, I'm going to take a little point off. I think we could have done without the retcon. I think it was a little gratuitous, in my opinion. So I'm going to give the story an 8. But I think that's probably like a really, really critical score. And I want to emphasize here, as always, I say, if an episode is like middle of the road, like there's a lot of middle of the road anime out there, and like you'd give them a solid 5 on plot. A lot of people got mad at me back in the day with Demon Slayer because I always said that was like a 5 out of 10 story. At least season 1 was. It picked up, but it's beautiful animation, but 5 out of 10 story, if I'm completely frank with you. At least, once again, season 1. So I think an 8 is a fair assessment here. The retconning did turn me off ever so slightly because it became a bit much. I didn't detest it by any stretch, but I'm going to take a point off for it. The fact that we lacked some stakes is at least worth 1 point. Maybe you could say a half point for the retcon and 1.5 points for the lack of stakes. But other than that, I adore this episode, and I cannot wait for the next episode of Dragon Ball Daima. And I'll be honest with you, I'm looking for the next showdown with the Tamagami. With the Tamagami 2, I'm guessing, is going to be the next one they fight. So stoked to see how that plays out. Make sure you guys like, comment, and share. I kind of rambled on with this, but I love this episode so much, despite my criticisms. So I'll see you guys again next week for more Dragon Ball Daima.